Well, world studies. I don't know, what do we call these? Snow notes? I'm not sure. But we're going to, as I mentioned to you guys in class, it's like if we were out 2 days, this was probably a little bit of some of what you have coming just to keep things moving along. All right. So we're going to do about, I'll say about 15, 20 minutes here. See if we can move ourselves along a few slides. Okay. And so, yep, get your notebook out and get yourself strapped in here for a few, and we'll take you through where we left things off. And I think where we had left things off is we'd been looking at a list at some other inventions of the Industrial Revolution, and so we're kind of picking it up from there, moving on to section F, and that is going to be a new way of getting work done. As we've talked a little bit about in our urbanization game, we've talked about the idea that factory life is becoming more and more of an issue as people who used to be farming out in the countryside or working at cottage industries in the countryside, they can't make any money doing that anymore, right? They can't compete. The factories are able to produce goods far faster, far cheaper than they can. And so in the end, they got to pack it in and they head to the cities to look for jobs working in those factories. And so that'll be a part of, we'll introduce you kind of to some of this and also come back and basically revisit some of this as well, as far as what life was like and kind of what this did socially. And again, some of these things are things that you've already kind of been hinted at in the urbanization game, as we were, having to build more pubs in our little village to accommodate for all these workers who need to, for some reason or another, need to drink their troubles away. And we'll get into some of that. Might even catch into some of that in these notes. If not, we'll have some that'll be waiting for us when we get back together. We'll see here. We'll see how far we can get. Okay. So as I was just talking about with what you're getting there with number one, yeah. Where some people are going to be able to find jobs. Again, this is happening because so many people are losing their jobs, especially people living out there in the rural areas, in the countrysides, in the little villages that don't have factories. And so, it's going to always be, there's going to be like this push-pull that goes on with this rise of factory work. And, these will be jobs that are going to become precious in some of the cities where there's not enough of them to go around for the number of people that are pouring into these cities looking for work. But there's always going to be, where a new factory opens up, you can be rest assured that it's going to put someone else out of a job somewhere else. Probably, again, a cottage industry, or maybe someone working out, working for a farmer who, is as they begin to take more and more control over their land, are going to be kicking some of those peasants off of their land. All these different pressures coming together. Okay, so that gets kind of into number one. As we're just talking about this idea of how does it, take away jobs from others. Well, A is giving you one example, right? What comes to be known as the power loom, and you see a picture of one of those on the right side. Again, textile industry. This is going to be huge. The factories will produce a lot of different things, but especially in the first industrial revolution, the first phase of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of it has to do with the production of fabrics, of cloth that can be made for clothing, and maybe producing giant sails for ships and things like that. And again, just basically, I know we don't think of clothing as a major need, because it's just like, you can go pick up a wardrobe pretty much anywhere here. But back then, yeah, I mean, in an age where everything was handmade. This is a game changer, that all of a sudden you can have these machines that make fabric, and then with what will eventually be the introduction of the automatic sewing machine and things like that. It's going to just completely remake that whole process of how people get the clothes they wear, the sheets and blankets that they use, all that sort of thing. And the reality is that, like it says there, one of those machines is going to do the work that 12, 15, 20 people would have been needed to do, using the old-fashioned method of again, using the old spinning wheel, and having to make that thread by hand, and then weave that thread into fabric by hand, and then produce the clothing all by hand. This is the process of where, again, why you end up with that idea of people losing jobs is because these machines can do them so much more quickly and easily. Okay. And so, as we were talking about before, all right, the big result we see is what we technically refer to as urbanization. All right. And what you see being described there with result number one, yes, is what you would describe when, and, if someone asks you, could you please define what urbanization is? That's kind of what it is, okay? And so as more people make that decision that their best chances, their best luck is going to be to, just give up what they're trying to do out in the countryside and move to a city, those cities grow, just like your city, and the urbanization game is so rapidly growing. That is urbanization, all right? Kind of one of those fancy terms you can use to describe the growth of these cities that is taking place during the Industrial Revolution. And again, hopefully we see, this is all interconnected, one thing causing another, going all the way back to, Richard Arkwright and that water frame, and then James Watt in the steam engine. And, here now, fast forward, not that many years, but now we're starting to see these big cities that are starting to grow big, just larger and larger, packed full of more and more people. I think that gets us to result number two. And that is that, all these people crowding into these cities, all of them kind of hoping the same thing, got to get in there, got to get a job, hopefully, make enough money to, get in a house or an apartment or something, keep my family fed, that sort of a thing. And what they're going to find out is that, there's lots of these factories popping up all over the place. They only require a limited number of workers to keep those machines going. And so a lot of the people are going to find that, that they're out of luck. And so a lot of them unemployed, trying to, whether they're left, begging on the streets, whether they're having to combine living with, 2, 3, 4 other families in a small tenement apartment or in a house that they can just kind of pool whatever they can find in terms of money to pay for some rent. But you are going to see in these cities as they grow more and more unemployment. Like it talks about, there are more and more people that we would define as living in poverty, who struggle to be able to feed themselves, feed their families, who struggle to even keep a roof over their heads. And we have to remember, this is back in a day and age, a big difference between now and then. Most societies nowadays, we have what we call like safety nets for people who end up in situations like this. A lot of states will pay you what's called unemployment benefits while you're looking for another job. And so you'll have, maybe 6 months where you'll get some assistance from the state to help you along to, pay for food and shelter while you're looking for another job. It doesn't last forever. Eventually that money will run out, and then you're, if you haven't figured out something by then, you're in trouble. Those kind of things did not exist back then. If you couldn't find a job, you're immediately in trouble. Okay. I mean, you're immediately, if you owe money, you're going to end up in a debtor's prison. All right. They just didn't, people just, it was a very different attitude back then. It was pretty harsh, and it was pretty black and white. And if you were in money trouble, you were either going to end up on the streets really quick. If you have a wife and kids, your wife and kids are going to be out there begging right alongside with you, trying to get people to throw whatever few coins they might throw your way, or a little bit of food that, you can share together. But, if you, for whatever reason, you had a house, you had an tenement room, and you no longer can afford to pay and you owe money, that's reason enough for you and your family to end up being sent into a debtor's prison. Well, actually, didn't always work that way. Sometimes the kids would be sent off to an orphanage, so the families would be split up, and the adults would go to a debtor's prison and work off the debt that they owe, but their kids could be sent off to an orphanage. And so, separation going on there. Tough times. Okay. And our third result there is what we see is with this massive growing, what we call income gap. And that is where you see a very small group of people on one end that are doing incredibly well. And yes, these are the factory owners. the people who run these businesses. It's in some cases it's the the managers who make sure that the factories are running at maximum efficiency day to day. It's the supervisors and the overseers that make sure that the people working there are not wasting time, are working hard the whole time they're on the clock. Um, they're on one end, and there's not many of them who are doing either fabulously well, or at least doing okay. Maybe a little, we'd consider to be a little bit more middle class, whereas where that kind of what we call middle management people in those factories would be. They can afford a home. They can afford to put food on the table, and they're not worried day by day because they've got a job that has responsibilities, and because they oversee people, they're paid more. But for the working folks, the people who are on the factory floors and running those power looms and making sure the steam engines are running, they are the ones that make up the mass of the population. And they are in a 2-day struggle just to make it. And so in between them, you've got this huge gap. Okay. There's not a whole lot of people that are in the middle. It's like either you are doing really well and you're on one end, and again, that is a small percentage, or you're part of the vast percentage that's on the other end and struggling. Okay, that is result number 3. All right, and yes, here we'll dive into some of these work conditions, and actually we'll probably just do this slide and we'll call it good because I'll probably get us in about 15 minutes. All right. So let's talk about what work conditions were like. Well, there you go. There's the pretty basic workout here, and this was in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, in the early days when still before you have gas lights and eventually electrical light and things like that, you pretty much were limited by daylight hours. And typically for a good chunk of the year at least. I mean, I know it gets a little bit more challenging in the winter, but about 12 hours of light that you have to work in these factories. And yeah, they would try to do a little bit of work by candle or oil lamp light afterwards, but that you couldn't do in any kind of a lengthy period of time, because you were just going to end up seeing more people being injured on the job and things like that. And so typically about a 12-hour day. Your day might start about 6 a.m. and go on till 6 p.m. when the light starts to fade. And then 6 days a week, all right? 6 days a week. Most of the countries, whether we're talking about over in Europe or here in America, where and really those are the parts of the world that embrace this industrial revolution the most. Usually you had Sunday, what they called the Sabbath day, and that was your day to to worship, to rest, that sort of thing. But the concept of a 5-day work week, okay, or I mean, you guys with your 4-day technically and non-technically 4-day work week, at Seton. No, it was 6 days a week. You had that one day off. All right. And there were plenty of situations where even that didn't exist. There were times when people did work 7 days a week, when a business, maybe if they were struggling to keep up with orders and they needed their workforce to just kind of double up and get even more produced. Sometimes that 6 days would turn into 7 days. And are you getting overtime for any of that? Heck no, that doesn't even exist. Okay, you as a worker have no one that you have no rights. You can be fired in an instant if you if you are struggling to maybe get to work on time or staying awake at your machinery, anything like that. That's grounds for being fired. Boom, you're gone. You're gone. All right. Low pay, what we call subsistence wages. Subsistence means it's the basics you need to subsist on. Live on is another way of thinking about it. Folks, this was, the idea that you're working a job and, you can save a little on the side, maybe take a little vacation in the summer. No. These people are being paid way less than, everything is adjusted back to 19th century, money value, but these people are being paid way less than $1 an hour. And it is barely enough to feed them and barely enough to pay for a room for rent. They're literally just working to live. You're not saving up money. You're not having money left over to go out or to buy presents or anything like that. You literally work to live and nothing more. And it is a rough living. Okay, again, part of the reason why these people are not going to live very long is because they are working tough jobs, long hours, and always under pressure. Always, just your life is basically 24-hour stress all the time, because if you slip up, if you make a mistake, it's disaster. Okay. No child labor laws back then. Nowadays there's certain jobs, kind of like summer jobs and things, that allow a 14-year-old to work under very, very specific conditions. There's limits to how many hours you can work and things like that. Otherwise, you have to be 16 to work in some jobs, 18 to work in some others. Back then, there were no laws whatsoever. And because most of these children, coming from these kind of families, they can afford schooling anyway. And so as long as, as soon as they were young enough to get them in a factory, they were in there. And sometimes some of these factories preferred having these younger people in, because they had small little, hands and arms. Sometimes if a machine jammed and an adult couldn't get into the machinery to remove a piece of lint or something that had jammed up some of the gears in a machine. Well, hey, a kid could get in there to do that, and get that piece of lint or whatever else was jamming the machine up to get it out. Unfortunately, a lot of times when they would pull that obstruction out of the gears, the machines would kick back on again, and in some cases the kids would be dragged into the machine, and well, I'll let you use your imagination there. That was going to be one less kid that was going to be going home that night. And so, yeah, a lot of times the kids got some of even the more dangerous jobs in these factories. And so, yeah, again, you're not going to, contributing to why, people did not live that long, was that you're living in those kind of conditions from the time, before you even reach the age of 10. Kind of like that group of boys you see in that photograph there. I think those are all coal miners, actually, not factory workers, because that was another place where you'd see a lot of the kids being put to work. And bonus, because women were working in these factories. I mean, yeah, everyone in the family was working, and everyone was working just to keep, again, food on the table and a roof over their heads. All of them combining everything they're making together and coming up with basic subsistence wages. And to the factory owners, the good news was, because of, the patriarchy and the fact that women still aren't viewed as equal to men, that gave them the excuse to not have to pay women as much. And of course, kids are kids, and so they didn't have to pay them as much. And so for as little as they paid the men, they paid the kids even less. All right. Adding insult to injury is, back then, there were no safety regulations at all. Nowadays in a factory, I don't care if it's a food processing plant or automotive factory, I mean, there are all kinds of safety rules that have to be followed. And companies who found in violation, I mean, they can be fined heavily. They can be shut down until they prove that they're following the rules. Back then, none of that exists. And so this machinery is not built for safety. These machines are built to produce stuff as quickly, as cheaply as possible. And a lot of times the machines are incredibly dangerous. And, a lot of times workers who are minus fingers, minus a hand, minus limbs, which, again, oftentimes means they can't work anymore. And now they're just a dependent that their family has to figure out how to feed. And, it's one less person bringing in income, which means a lot of times they're out on the streets begging. All right. And so one more thing that just, again, puts that pressure on, keeps those life expectancies low, and makes life miserable. All right. And then where we'll finish it off there is just the pollution factor. And pollution could come in a lot of different ways. We talked about the fact that these steam engines that are being used in a lot of the factories by the middle of the 19th century are being powered by coal, burning coal. And that coal produces this black, sooty smoke that, as you're breathing that stuff in, kind of like those boys even up there coal mining, they're breathing in coal dust. And over time, that creates these black spots all over your lungs that eventually form into cancers, and that kills you, okay? Beyond the coal, if you were working in one of those textile factories, you were working in an environment where there's cotton lint, all kinds of just floating around in the air. And yeah, you're breathing it in. No, you're not wearing a mask. You're just breathing it in. That caused all kinds of respiratory issues that in the end could kill you. And so, again, dangers everywhere you looked. In these factories, whether it's the machinery you're operating or the very air you're breathing in, all of it seems to be designed to make sure that you don't live much older than 30 or 40, and a life that, I mean, in the end of it all, is it really worth living? Which is what more and more people are going to slowly come to the realization of. And that will lead to some pushback against the Industrial Revolution, some resistance. And that is what we will get to next time when we jump back into this. But there's 20 minutes, and hopefully that gets you plenty of information, even some stuff you can get over there into that left column. Anyhow, now that you got that taken care of, you can get back out there. And if you still have any snow left, go throw some snowballs for me, okay? All right. We'll see you in class. Bye.